Yo, yo.
Here we are.
Yeah, yeah.
Do this.
So, um, we're talking about the 12th day of the week of the cane, right?
Yep.
So, let's start off with the week of the cane, right?
Okay.
So, this is about the connection between heaven and earth, right? The unification of those two planes of existence and the understanding of growth towards a higher perspective from this base reality. So we start out here in this dense form of space and time to try to jump dimensionally and achieve the things on a stellar plane that we want down here. Try to channel that stuff down to us like a sugar cane, right? Grows in a fairly straight stalk. Sometimes it's a little wandering, but it grows
Right.
straight up and is full of water and nutrients that it's bringing from both the bottom and the top,
Right.
right?
My, under, my understanding too is that the reed, as far as a personality type or uh, needs that rigidity is part of the challenge of being in the cane week, is because in order to have the most vertical growth and strength, to reach this new plane, you got to follow the rules. You gotta stay in the lines. Because yeah, if you have a little bit of curving, it takes a lot more work to kind of get that thing to go straight up again. You
Mm-hmm.
know, so you
Mm-hmm.
can be a rigid person. You can be kind of a little bit like let's follow the rules,
Right.
and that can be tough or a little bit tough on people who are a little bit more flowy.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And so the reed is a really good example because they tend to be a water plant, right?
Mm,
They start in the water, tap their roots in there, and grow up to a whole new density, right, into the air.
mm,
So I mean, not only are they rooted in the soil, which is incredibly dense, they're growing up through water, which is thicker, more viscous, more difficult to move through, though you might feel lighter because it's a
mm.
different kind of density. And then you go up into a whole nother atmosphere, right? And yeah, the idea that you do have to kind of stick to this kind of straight and narrow pathway in order to grow in that specific manner is the reality of the situation. My grandmother, we were talking about grandmothers before the podcast. My grandmother, or you were talking about yours rather. Uh,
Mhm.
my grandmother was born on 11 reed, the flowering of the reed.
Mm, mm.
So like she had some dissonant things in her personality and in her life, but she always did her best to walk the straight and narrow, right? It wasn't easy for her because of the dissonance and the things that happened in her life. But as she got older, it became easier. And then at a certain point, she reached this different plane of existence. And for like the last 40 years of her life, it was easy. It
Right.
wasn't. It wasn't so tragic and painful. It was more just kind of dealing with the typical things you would have to deal with. You know, kids, grandchildren. Not major events like crazy spouses or
Sure.
death or cancer or things like that. You know,
Yeah.
because she.
At a, right, because at a certain point, the reed gets to relax into its new uh, atmosphere. Uh,
Yeah.
After a certain point, right, like the reed has grown strong and straight for so long, or done the best it can to stay on that track, so it has a certain stability and it can relax or whatever growth happens at the top. I'm not sure if this is necessarily true for reeds specifically, but like I've also heard or understand that the reed or the cane can also refer to the trunk of a tree. Um, and so but even the trunk of the tree, eventually has branches that come off, and it's very important that the branches come off and spread out and away, and then grow foliage and grow the flowers and the fruits or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
depending on the type of plant or tree, and that can signify the maturing of the tree. So at that
Mm-hmm.
latter half of life, it's like I've done the reed work, and just like on the Mayan cross, like when you're in the center of your life, or your midlife before you're an elder, and you get to the I'm not sure whether yeah your foot destiny, your when you kind of transition your Nawal sign into something else, that's probably when you can let go of the reedness of your life, because you've already those are ingrained. That's there. It's solid. It's not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's exactly what's going on. And so, like, it it's about, balance. It's not static balance, but a dynamic equilibrium. So, like you're saying, after a certain point, you've established yourself, and now you have to kind of branch out in a very symmetric way, right? So, like, those roots that you established with yourself, you're able to grow up with those, doing your best to maintain that straight and narrow path, so that you could come out into this new existence and spread your leaves, spread your wings, and fly, you know.
Yeah.
And so it's also, you know, the way to understand that many people have similar experiences, and that when you've reached that upper plane, you're able to bring those down to that more dense level for other people to understand, to allow them to grow to a higher
Right.
plane, right? So
Yeah.
that they can relate and be like, "Oh God, I'm not the only one." Okay,
Right.
maybe it's not supposed to be like, a struggle like this. I can relax and grow in this manner without trying to fight myself. And maybe I can let those things
Mm.
go, or and accept new things, or look at it from a different perspective, and then just
Right.
shoot up, like we were saying with
Yes.
chores and stuff like that. Like, washing dishes isn't a fun thing, but if you look at it from a different perspective, you can make it fun and make it more enjoyable. It's not necessarily the funnest thing to do in any case, but if you can enjoy yourself while you're doing it, you don't even notice at a certain point, and it just
Yeah.
becomes kind of an automatic, quick thing.
No, I love that. It makes me want to speak to, like, even though I kind of said, like, hey, let's talk about kind of like the challenges of a Reed character. Uh, there's a positive spin you can put on that too. Rigidity is also can be stoicism. It can be strength
Right?
despite the tide, despite the wind and the lashings of the environment. It's like staying the course. So it's determinism. It's like being determined and having willpower. It's really a strong um, thing. And then I was also thinking how you were talking about the reed um, being needing to be flexible, because like if it's mostly water too, that it does bend. That a reed like that's truly true to form, even a trunk of a new tree that's trying to grow as strong and straight up as it can, needs to be able to bend with the wind. Because if it is too rigid, too soon, it'll break, and then it has no chance of going straight up. So you need to be flexible as well. So despite, you know, uh, my understanding too, it seems that uh, there's still a structure, right? There's still a structure that needs to be adhered to, but the form is flexible, and that's
Mm-hmm.
maybe what you realize by the time that you've really matured into your read awareness, or if you're in a read week like we are right now, you kind of you start to play with that, the rules. You understand the rules, but now you can play with them and be flexible within them.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So, some things that need to be watched out for within this realm of the reed, this week of the reed, this understanding of connection between heaven and earth, is the desire to want to isolate, to withdraw, to retreat, to not, you know, embrace the unknown, to fear it, and to limit your own benchmarks, right? So, like, you could, like, taking the read as an example, you could sit there and grow short segments because you know you're going to have, more stability, and you will grow, but it'll just be this little tiny amount, because you're afraid of too much growth too fast, limiting yourself. But if you do that for your whole existence, you probably won't ever reach those higher planes of understanding, that easier form of life, because you didn't allow yourself to grow. You didn't allow yourself to push towards bigger benchmarks, right? To the higher goals. So, like, read segments tend to be, fairly substantial, and then it establishes this ring so that it can grow again from that point with some structure and some rigidity. It still, like you said, has some flexibility to it, but if your segments are too short, right, you're going to have this just dense, rigid structure that's just going to be short-lived and unfulfilled.
Yeah, get less experience. I guess. Yeah, experience less
Mm-hmm.
in the effort to be safe and
Right.
experience security. Yeah, that's going to
Mm-hmm.
be a really challenging and poignant thing to mark in today's day and age, because as we were kind of mentioning beforehand too, it's like the way we've kind of childproof in ways our education, and also just our the world as parents, trying to make everything safe for the kids, and they're not getting to experience, the cuts and scrapes that really help your own boundaries for yourself. And it's a difficult game to play, because you can put a lot at risk by growing too fast, and too straight, too soon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel my life has a great example, and I'm sure a lot of people's do too. When you experience loss and isolation, as a youth, like, you tend to grow up too fast, and that's one of the things that is a danger, within the energy of the read, the understanding, is that desire for isolation because it's safe.
Mm.
But when you're desiring connection and love and security from a parent, when one or both aren't there, either physically or emotionally, mentally, like, you are forced to be responsible for yourself, and odds are you're going to do it in the completely wrong way because you've got nothing to base it off of,
Mm.
right? So, I I lost my dad when I was young, right? And so it forced me into a level of maturity that I shouldn't have had at a young age, right? I'd always had that comment from other people, like my peers and from adults. It's like, wow, you're really mature for your age. It's like, well, yeah, I was forced to grow up at a young age. It's like, my mom's working, like, herself to death, in a industrial construction job, where, like I said, I lost my dad at a young age. So, like, a lot of the times, I was alone. Not entirely. I had babysitters, and my grandmother did her and grandfather did their best to be around as much as possible, but they couldn't be there forever.
Right.
My mom couldn't afford that at certain points, and sometimes it was inconvenient. So like I had to learn to cook for myself or forage for myself. And when you do that, like you tend to binge on foods. You tend
Oh, sure.
to eat crappier foods as opposed to try and understand how to cook good things for yourself, right? Or have those things made for you by the responsible parent who's present. And like I know a lot of other kids were latchkey kids, and so like we all were forced into this maturity and thus lost our opportunity to be kids. And
Mm.
so as we've grown up, like we're a lot of us, especially in the millennial age, are starving for that nostalgic hit that we had when those in those moments where we did get to be children in our youths,
Whoa.
right?
Yes.
That's why we're almost all of us are obsessed with our favorite cartoons or favorite video games or that favorite game that we used to
Right.
play. The kind of clothes that we used to wear, but don't incorporate that necessarily or move on from that because we just those were the best times in a tragic upbringing. You know,
Whoa.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I definitely know that. Well, it was as you were speaking about your experience. It was having me make my own parallels, and I had both my parents growing up. I had my own uh, bouts of maturity, and I was trying to think about where those might have come from. Because like by the time I didn't get to mature in that way uh, until I went to college and I was living on my own, right? So I didn't have my parents anymore, and I got to make those choices. So that's when I did my binging of X, Y, and Z. It probably wasn't the best for me,
mm,
and maybe that could be said the appropriate age to experiment in that way. Nobody would you know, probably ask for that experience to happen at a younger age or to have that kind of maturity need to come from somewhere else. But I'm also finding in this, in reference to like the reed growing very fast or, very short, uh, that gives me the sense that, in a sense, I was kind of growing short the early part of my life, because I had the protection and, almost, I wouldn't say my parents, my mom more especially, were like, was a helicopter mom. She was like a little self aware of that. Like she didn't want to be a helicopter mom. Um, but that probably put a sense of like, you know, exposure to the world in just little segments, little bits of growth where I might have been an energy that needed to explore and try things. Because that's what I'm experiencing now in my adult life is like I feel like I've missed out, like on on I could have been experiencing certain things so much sooner, um, but I'm working from a very thick and dense early stock of life, and now I'm trying to be flexible all here up at the top. Um, or maybe that's a good thing. Maybe I have a very strong base at which to operate off of, and so I can have lots of different avenues coming from out of there. But I do know that definitely made my maturity come into question in the 20 to 30 year span of my life, where I was just kind of like, oh man, what is this world where I have to make decisions for myself now? I'm no good at it,
mm-hmm,
and so I had to learn that in my adult life, where I do have more where I could make more dramatically the same probably uh, dangerous decisions, or maybe potentially more dangerous decisions because I'm a full grown adult in the eyes of you know my environment or the society. Whereas a kid, other people out in the world might look after you too. as an adult, I might make decisions without the maturity that could cause me more serious long-term damage.
Mm-hmm.
Um, anyway,
Well, it's interesting that you said that you had a stronger base, because I think that probably is the case. And I mean, to be fair, like my mom was fairly helicoptery when she was,
it's a mother.
when she
The
was
mother
around.
mothers tend to go that direction. Dads tend to, as I'm finding out with raising my own son. Uh, I want to let him explore a little bit, and mothers want to, see as little harm come to their babies as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which I'm sure is a survival technique, right? The best way to keep your kid from dying is to protect them, not let those dangerous things come and harm them. And that's like, wild animals, that's disease, that's, rock falling, uh, any number of things that in a primal sense could just immediately off a smaller, weaker creature. Whereas, the ones that are often out there exploring the most, are the ones who are more likely to allow those things to enter the child's life because they know it's going to make them stronger,
Hmm.
right? And so, like, you're out there exploring a lot, busting your butt, trying these things. You're curious about all these things that you didn't get to experience.
Mm.
And so, like, from your own experience, you've had the opportunity to grow more because of these things. They didn't kill you, obviously. So your kid should be just fine, so long as they have the best understanding of how to do those things. And quite often, it's trial by fire. Like, you got to do it in order to experience it properly, and
I think,
that means you have to fail a little bit in order
yeah,
to really earn your stripes, and learn those lessons properly.
I think that's true for both uh, fathers and mothers. Like,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of your strategy, it's tough. It's tough to see your kid hurting, um,
Yeah.
and um, even if you know that they need to go through some experience of pain in order to grow, in order to add that next section of read to their life experience. Um, that but I think knowing that it's inevitable, right? That
Mm-hmm.
some pain is going to happen. I wonder how that plays out just more broadly, or how, back to the individual, uh, based on their experience of life, whether or not they have these parental figures or these boundaries or this neighborhood, this community that's trying to raise them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if and damn it, I just lost the thread with all of that exposition. Well, maybe it'll
Well,
come back to me.
I'm
But yeah,
sure it
that
will.
I think we've really dove into the read sufficiently there. It's making me
Mm-hmm.
think too that since we're talking about our childhood too, that the other side of that is then the seed, which is the day that we're on,
Right.
uh,
Exactly.
and which has a similar kind of element to it in the sense that everything is contained within the seed. And we talked about this, I think, in the last episode a little bit about the seed. Was it a seed day too?
I think so. Actually,
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, maybe we won't spend too much time talking about the seed because we probably covered quite a bit of it.
Right,
But
and
yeah,
it's also
parallels.
12 seed, organic balance. So we discussed
Hmm.
that at length too.
Ooh, yes, yes.
Right, pollination, if you will, of um, of the power of the idea. Right, the pattern of growth, generation, sex and reproduction. So
Right.
the pollinating principle of sex and reproduction. So it's also, understanding that our lives are that fertile soil and from which mystery blooms within you, and that power of your intention or your thoughts are the seeds that you are planting to grow towards the heavens.
Whoa.
Right? So like if you maintain that garden of your body, right, in your mind, you're weeding out the garbage thoughts that people have projected on you. You're maintaining the good principles that you've learned. You're taking care of your body and maintaining your health. You're exercising, you're stretching, you're meditating, you're sleeping well, giving yourself plenty of water. And I mean, there's of course always room for exploration, like and libation. Like you can have fun injecting certain things into your reality, like saying, having a beer, or or maybe another kind of experience that changes the chemistry in your brain
Right.
to give yourself an altered state of experience, uh, so that you can grow in different ways, right?
Right.
It doesn't mean you do that constantly, because
No.
like
Right.
alcohol is a poison to the body, but
But I get what you're saying. I mean, I remember, I don't know how long ago it was, but I remember finding out that a drug technically is anything foreign that you put into the body. Um, and so all the food that you eat, um, what isn't a drug at a certain point.
right.
But then we're getting into the boundaries between what is you and what is, everything else. I mean, if you want to look at it too, it's like we're we're covered in microorganisms and a
Yeah.
microbiome that makes up, like, I don't know, like a good percentage, if not some. I don't want to say a majority, but it's a good percentage of our body weight. And so most of us, and then if you want to get into the physics or the quantum physics of it, it's like we're actually mostly space. We're actually not mostly matter. We're just condensed light. Anyway,
Right, and
to
then
the
what
point
is
where
what
it's
is
like,
matter, right? We've
yeah, and
obviously
then
got those space between the particles, but what are the particles really? Is, like you said, condensed light. So are we really anything truly physical?
right. So to the point of like having a beer or something, it's like, yeah, why not introduce more elements into your experience uh, to help in defining what you are. If you are what you eat, as an example, or you are what you drink, then yeah, choosing that diligent, in a what's the word, conscious way.
Mm-hmm.
If you're choosing what you're putting into your body in a conscious way, like I'm going to have this beer, uh, versus I'm going to have this celery stick, like you're doing both, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
or it's important to at least consider doing both, and to try and avoid saying, "Oh, I don't eat celery" or "I don't drink beer,"
Mm-hmm.
because you know both are based on experience, probably past experiences and fear of future consequences for doing so. But you've never had that piece of celery in the context where you are right then, right there. You've never had that beer, so it's not necessarily permissive. It's not saying just go out and do whatever you want,
Right.
but it's also not necessarily, um, and it's also not totally restrictive. You got to find your own middle way. If you've abused a certain thing, my father-in-law talks about how he grew up in Yakima and used to pick an apple from the trees because there was orchards on the way to school every day, and he'd have an apple every day. And now he's like these days he stays away from apples because he's allergic to them. So like you can overconsume, and out of how some allergies are formed is just from your body goes and makes a connection to a certain food because you've had it so much.
Yeah. To that effect, my mother also made herself allergic to peanuts because she
Right?
had peanut butter a PB&J almost every day for lunch for God knows how long. Which, I mean, it's easy source of protein. It's got copper and a lot of nutrients that you need. But like, she did it so much that her body now rejects it. You
Yeah.
know, her tongue swells up. She can't. One of her favorite candies was a Reese's peanut butter cup.
Oh,
Right? Can't eat those
yes.
anymore. Can't.
Ah,
Not even an option.
it's rough. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And so, like, it's something that she's had to get used to, but ultimately, it's probably better for her in the long run. Not just sit there and abuse something, is just to
And,
make it right, eating it. So just make it a not a consistent part of your diet, but use it with some regularity so that you don't over abuse it.
right.
And the
And
same
that's
can be said about any kind of substance that you
right.
use, like alcohol, cannabis, psychedelics of any variety. Like, you have too much of those, and you end up either having a mental breakdown or stuck in that realm, just seeing funny colors all over the place and watching cartoon characters walk by that nobody else can see. You know?
Yeah. Uh, uh, um, the mechanisms are there in place too, like allergies and like probably being put in a psych ward or people telling you that you're crazy because you're always on drugs, or having psychonaut adventures. Um, the that your body will tell you, like by developing an allergy, hey, you're too much peanut butter now. Like, let's try some other. Let's get some variety in the diet.
Right.
We love peanut butter. Yes, we know that, but it's time to maybe explore some other options. And the body
Mm-hmm.
will be like, if you take it too far, the body will be like, we're just not gonna take any more peanut butter. We're
Exactly.
gonna force your hand basically by developing this uh, um, allergy. And the same can happen outside of yourself. So, like, yeah, if you're like, wow, I love, expanding my mind and always being um, in woo woo world, because man, mushrooms are so good. I'm always going to be living like that, Alice in Wonderland style.
Mm-hmm.
Um, then people, yeah, you're eventually not going to be able to take care of yourself, and people are going to get tired of taking care of you, and they're going to be like, you belong somewhere where you can be contained, and it's like the most humane thing we can think of on how to deal with somebody like that. You need to go to rehab. You need to, people will force you outside of yourself to change what you're ingesting.
Right. Yeah. And
Uh,
the
yeah.
exact same goes with thoughts too. The things that
Oh,
we tell ourselves and the environments that we put
yes.
ourselves in for other people to tell us these things.
Right.
Right. So we were talking earlier about a book series that goes into the idea that we need to learn things that the school systems aren't teaching us,
Mm,
but at the same time, like, we're inundated with all these weird facts that we're not going to use at large, right? And so, like, and then there's the idea of like the environments that we're in, like that schools basically look like prisons,
mm,
right? And so, like, we're confining ourselves in these brick buildings with windows with bars on them, like maybe not bars necessarily, but a meshing that'll keep those windows from being broken, which kind of give the illusion of bars and gates and fencing. So it's kind of locking you in, and you're told, like, you have to go to this period, these times of the day, go, 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 and you have to move at that bell. So you develop this Pavlovian response, just like, oh, the bell's ringing, I gotta go. When really
yeah.
it's just like, that's not how the world works. That's how a factory works.
Right.
And so, like, we're just taught this rote memorization and do the thing, and you'll get a stamp. But you're not
Yeah.
taught critical thinking. You're not taught, you know, ways and means of living. You're just, given just enough so you're not a complete imbecile, but not enough to make you an intelligent person, right?
Yeah, it makes you very efficient at singular tasks or narrow fields.
Mm-hmm.
Very much like a seed or a reed that is too rigid, a seed that you can't break out of. You
Mm-hmm.
have everything your basic essentials you need in the seed, right? But like in order to break through, you need to learn something new. You need to experience a new medium. You need to get out in the soil. You need to break through the soil and reach for the sky.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that you otherwise yeah you're going to be self-contained. A factory or um, a prison is containment. So a prison is very much like you stay in the seed because um, that's kind of a interesting way. I'm not sure that I can really take this because like well, people who are incarcerated find liberation through their mind if they are able to rehabilitate themselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like if you're put in the psych ward, just like if you get an allergy to apples or peanut butter. It's like you at a certain point, everybody has a threshold. Not everybody gets to meet their threshold of where it's like, okay, I got to break out of the seed now, or there's got to
Mm-hmm.
be something else than just this. Um,
Yeah.
it forces you to kind of go deeper, and it can be scary, but it can also be liberating. So you get exposed to all these different thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
But pretty soon, like the voice or the thought that got you incarcerated in the first place gets challenged, or another voice rises to meet it, and then supersedes it because it's like, wow, I found a new equilibrium here, or I found a new way of liberating myself because I've never thought like this before.
Mm-hmm.
And you can find yourself developing leaps and bounds from that point. But yeah,
Yeah.
that is not to say that prisons are a great way to induce that. If prisons and
Right.
schools are mirroring each other, it's like the alternative has got to be like we were talking about with the read, some balance of or like with mothers and fathers, some balance of exposure as well as some framework to kind of keep you um, uh, at least relatively safe.
Right. So to your credit, like where folks are like finding new avenues of thinking and rehabilitation in something like a prison, like I kind of think of that as, someone with no structure, like you were saying, finally being forced into some sort of structure so that they can find some sort of equilibrium, and then taking the right opportunity, or having the right opportunity to get some exposure to some new forms of thinking that they've never had before. Because a lot of folks who are in prison like have this mindset that they've been imposed upon, or that they've been forced to follow because it was their only means of survival,
Mm.
right? And so they're doing what they know will get them somewhere, even though that might necessarily not be the safest for the rest of society, or is, not the most conducive for a healthy lifestyle. Until, like, okay, zone in. That's where a lot of people find religion. That's where a lot of people like you
Mm.
gain a degree, or find, a
Right.
whole new means of learning, a vocation, and all of a sudden, like, their life can turn around because they're giving themselves these new thoughts. These, maybe I can do this. My favorite comedian right now is a guy called Ali Sadiq. I don't know if you've heard of him, but this dude, like, this is basically his life. Is he grew up in a very chaotic, unbalanced way, where, his mom was basically single most of her life, so she was working her butt off to support her kids, and his sister, who is 2 years older than him, was mostly raising him. So kids raising kids, it's not exactly the right way to do it. It doesn't give you the right foundations. It's going to keep
Lord of
you
the
alive.
Flies.
What? Yeah, yeah, Lord of the Flies. Yeah. Um, you listened, damn it, because this is going to keep you alive. And then he actually had the opposing experience where he got to live with his dad, who was a total bachelor, but also like kind of living a life of crime himself. So like he was able to support his kid, but again, he wasn't there in the right ways that he needed to be. Ironically, if his parents had stayed together, he'd probably have a more balanced life and like not have had these experiences that he did. But he went to prison and found a whole new way of being, and before he got out, he decided that he was going to be a comedian. And since then, like he's been really successful with it. Of course, there's some rocky stuff happening. Like you got to learn things. You got to, you know, see what's for you, what's not for you. But he's honed it into just an amazing storytelling style that is freaking hilarious, and is so relatable on so many different levels, and is raw, is real, and is very encouraging. Like he doesn't tell you not to do things that he did. He's like, you could do it, but here's the
Right.
results of what will
Right.
happen if you do. So
Um,
yeah, it's great because he's got those things that he's kind of like groomed his garden to
right.
a much better refined degree than his upbringing would have led him otherwise.
Right. It's funny how often we hear stories like that. Those are the exceptional cases, it seems, right? Where it's like you have a really troubling situation, but somehow you manage to squeeze through. It's like, yeah, you could be, to use our coal and diamond analogy, um, you could be a piece of coal right next to the coal that turns into a diamond, but just didn't have quite enough pounds per square inch of pressure to get you there. But you can feel some of the churning happening. Uh, it was also making me think of like, to what extent is that necessary to, I mean, in order to create diamonds, it's absolutely necessary, but like, um, to what extent, just like you need to experience pain, you need to experience some struggle, uh, in order to narrow your focus the same way that he did to hone his comedic craft. Like you wouldn't get that otherwise unless you had enough experience or trials to go. This is what I'm doing, and all your energy and focus is now um, on it. You have your awareness becomes narrowed, just like your situation was narrowed. To your physical circumstances were narrowed, and it forced that's like all the psi. That's all the pressure on the coal to become a diamond. It like focuses it, and just like a laser through a diamond, right? Like it's like it just cuts through and becomes so streamlined.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, to the extent that that's required to to reach great heights, you
Yeah.
need um, yeah, you need to come up against something. You need to be restrained in a way. That was also making me think of Temple Grandin, who there's a movie about her. Basically, she had autism, and she found comfort in she lived on a cattle farm,
Oh
or
yeah, yeah.
that's where, yeah, and she found comfort in using the devices that the cattle were put into before they went to slaughter, and it was a
Mm-hmm.
very restrictive, um, like a straitjacket, but by being contained in that way, it helped her, find a sense of calm, a sense of peace that she didn't
Mm-hmm.
otherwise wasn't able to attain when she's out in the world being free.
Right.
So there's something there that makes a lot of sense, that we might feel a drive towards a certain way that is dangerous for us, but we wouldn't realize it until we meet the consequences, have the experience that tells us, oh, this is how I can integrate whatever that uh, drive is pushing me
Mm-hmm.
towards.
Yeah. That's a great example. It shows you, like you said, like those that necessity for some sort of structure, that rigidity for you to truly grow and expand in the best ways possible, towards a very particular goal that your life is oriented towards, like
Mm,
the diamond, the coal turning into a diamond. Like you have to have that darkness, that pressure, that the right mixture of chemicals and heat in order to compress and reach your ultimate goal, which is actually what the seed is all about, is enthalpy as opposed to entropy.
mm,
So enthalpy is the essentially the destined goal based off of the circumstances of your life, right? So that coal being in the pressure and the heat, its enthalpy, its path
mm,
is towards a diamond, whereas entropy is the state by which matter is the most stable, right? Is what it's gearing towards if there's no other outside influences. So
mm,
a diamond's entropy is to go towards coal, is to just be carbon. But because it's so condensed and crystallized in a structure, it's going to take so freaking long for it to break down into just bare carbon that we would never notice it. Its entropy is just
mm.
is coal, is carbon, but that it but entropy speaks nothing towards timeline, the time scale for how long it's going to take to get there. Whereas enthalpy is just the opposite direction, right? It's we're given those pressures, we're given this fuel, we're given this heat where we have some sort of, say, fire under our butts,
Yeah.
that motivation to go towards something, you know between the pressure and the heat, like things are building up, man. It's got to
Right.
crystallize into something to become something more, something better, something more worthwhile. Otherwise it's just going to break down and burn.
I'm wondering if this too is making me think of like whether it's the seed's choice to break free from its shell, and also thinking about the shell itself as being this point where the um, intolki, what do you
Enthalpy,
call it?
yeah.
Yeah, and where it breaks, like the shell being this membrane, just like the the gate to your prison cell, or the um, your own mental liberation.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get access to thoughts if you're overwhelmed with thoughts of negativity about yourself? How can you get free of it if you have depression, or right, any kind of mental so for some reason I want to refrain from saying disorder, but like, yeah, if you're struggling with some sort of mental capacity, uh, if you don't have the right environment, right? Like just like a seed needs the right amount of heat, needs the right amount of like to feel ready to start sprouting out, right? Uh, the the seed won't do it if
Mm-hmm.
it's too cold, too wet, too hot, too cold. It needs so almost like it feels like I'm kind of driving this towards almost like it's not it, where it feels like it may not be up to us. And if we're a read, it may not be up to us how long our segments are. That at any point in time where we become aware of the our stock, our trunk, our um, what's outside of our shell of our seed,
Mm-hmm.
um, that that's an opportunity, I suppose, to make a change, to
Yeah.
go to reflect. How do I normally think about my situation? What kind of stock or tree or reed do I think I am? Um, do I usually think I'm not ready for the next stage? let's try, it's an opportunity to go, what if I was? Just ask the question and
Mm-hmm.
reframe it for yourself. Um, because, yeah, the reason that you're probably coming to that awareness is because there is some sense of the universe telling you you're ready.
Mm-hmm.
If you're even asking the question, that's opening the door to you now starting to sprout. You now starting to grow to that next stage of your your readness.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Um, so you could also interchange seed for egg
Mm,
in this context, and you're absolutely right. In some cases, it's not your choice when you're that in that stage, because if you're not given the right environment, if you're not given enough heat, if you're too hot, if you don't have enough nutrients or moisture or the right care to develop properly internally, you won't have the strength and wherewithal to be able to break out of that shell, right? Because many times, like an egg, will, if left in the cold, even though it reached a certain point of development, will die,
right.
right? An oversaturated seed that doesn't have enough germination, that wasn't developed enough before it fell and hit the ground and entered the soil, will just rot, right? So a lot of things have to come into harmony, at least enough for that shell to be broken. And it's an internal thing that has to happen for that shell to be broken. So
Yeah.
sometimes it is that pressure, right? It's that pressure, it's that you've, excuse me, you've grown so much and developed so much in that shell that now it's a for the egg, it's too tight, it's too restrictive. There's nowhere else you can go. It starts to become miserable, and
Hmm.
you can't possibly imagine how you could continue life in this restrictive environment. So you have to break out.
Yeah.
It's an internal desire to burst forth and become something new, to develop, to grow, to seek the light, right? To seek the truth, to seek the warmth, the air, the
Right.
nutrition, right? The things that'll feed your soul, your being, your mind, and satisfy all your desires and emotions and cravings, and allow you that space to expand before you can actually do it, right? And when you do break out of that shell, oftentimes it's an incredibly vulnerable state that you're in.
Oh
So
yeah.
a lot of things can just come in and just swoop you up and just eat you, right? If you're not in that in a structured contained environment, or with a proper protector like a mother hen, like she's going to be as protective as possible for her chicks. But if she's not, diligent, those things can just get swooped up by some sort of predator of any kind. They can be exposed to the weather and die because they didn't have any kind of protection. You know, same thing with a seed, like germination. Like we germinate seeds all the time because they're more nutritious. They've got more vitamins, right? And so we eat those. And just a lot of creatures do that. Like many cases have occurred where an entire field is germinated, and then a flock of birds just come and just eat all the germs, and now you've got no crops. So sometimes it's really good to have that restriction, to be guided, right? So one example that was coming to my mind when we were talking about structures that are created around us. Oh boy, I'm gonna have to call him back. To kind of limit our mobility and such, like a school or prison, like would be a pot, right? Like just say like a terracotta pot. You know, you plant your seed, you let it grow, and like it, most oftentimes, because you've given it good soil, good nutrition, good amount of light, the right temperature in the environment, can explode into this, oh god, he's into this reality of being, and just have prolific amounts of growth. But at a certain point, it's going to become root bound. It's not going
Oh
to
yeah.
grow the same because it can't expand properly within that
The new container.
constraint in that
Yeah.
container. So either you give it a new container, like a bigger pot, or you plant it outside in the dirt and
So,
remove all the restrictions and allow it to grow the way it needs to and wants
uh,
to. So all of a sudden now you're free and you can grow and do the things that you wanted to do, but you've already had that structure to create your foundation.
the the other thing that's come to mind in all this talk about containers is the other representation of the seed is also the net. Am I correct there? That
The
it's also the net, like a net.
I
I don't know if that's like I don't know if
think
or
so.
maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's like a Guatemalan Yucatan difference.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but I'm just seeing some parallels because like a net, um, is used to like harvest fish or to capture things and
Mm-hmm.
contain things,
I
and yet, um, uh, and same thing, it kind of has that structure,
mm-hmm.
and um, um, yeah, I don't know, that same thing. Like it has a process of opening and closing to release or to capture, um, uh, depending on. And I think that some of the references that I've caught on for being a net too is you can get tangled. I don't know where
Yeah.
tangling kind of parallels being a seed, but like nets made of twine, rope, or reed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, ever tried to untangle a fishing line? I mean, yeah, uh, nets can
It's
be
foobar.
yeah, they can kind of be overwhelming and get tangled in themselves. And in that sense, like a net, like a seed, the trap is itself, like staying within itself, or like the reed, you're talking about isolation and like being too much in your own space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I believe uh, the number 16 is the net
Oh, so
specifically.
it's a different wall altogether.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
No
yeah,
worries.
but
I'm thinking. Yeah.
it is a good example, um, because being root bound, like you are going to end up having a tangled mess
Roots.
of roots, so that can translate to your thoughts, right? Like, because that's basically a good example of a root structure, right? It reaches nearly every portion of your body,
Yeah.
and I believe the Aborigines in Australia call it the mind a tangled fishing net,
Whoa.
because if you sit there and try to untangle it, you're just going to get lost. You just
Yeah.
And that's what happens when you get trapped in your mind. You're just sitting there trying to untangle all these threads that are just so locked together that
Whoa.
it's yeah, like I said, foobar. It's messed up
That's
beyond
making.
all recognition.
I'm glad you brought that up. That's making me realize at different points in my life, I've felt like different stages of my life. One relatively recently, and one when I think I was like in ninth grade. I remember being in Spanish class and being like, my brain cannot fit any more information in it it just felt so full, and like everything was pushing like a tangled mess in there. Like this is too much. Maybe my brain is trying to take too much in, and I don't know. I don't know when it was in the last year or two where I had a very similar feeling, and I think it's my brain getting ready for a bigger container. It's like I need to outgrow this so that I can let all of the different tendrils and threads go their various directions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, I feel at this point I do feel like I'm on the other side, but I'm sure there'll come a day where the container will feel tight again, and there'll be a lot of pressure in here. It does feel like your brain's going to explode. It's just like just no more information for a little while, please. Maybe it's just it's a signal to kind of like take a breath and sit down, R&R,
Mm-hmm.
just reduce the amount of inputs that are coming
Yeah, and I mean that could be like an like that overabundance of stimulation can literally mean because it's an electrical system, right? It could just be you're starting to overheat the system and burn up the mechanisms in there so much so that it's just overload, literal overload. And
in.
so the way I believe the Aboriginals of Australia were best advising against stuff like that is to get yourself out of here and bring yourself down here into your heart and your gut, right? Because those are the two brains that you have before this one develops.
And they're more powerful in ways that we rarely tap into these days.
Mm-hmm.
We rely so heavily on this mind. And this is what we understand to be our mind.
Yeah.
And I've been feeling that a lot recently, especially like either during a breath practice or meditation. I'm feeling a lot of strain right here in this connection. This is the causeway where I'm trying to move that energy down so that I can access the power that is here that I've kind of, I don't know, haven't exercised as much during my life. It's all been concentrated here, and this only can do so much. It has a very narrow field that it can focus on and process. And we have this whole body that can help and is much more powerful in so many ways to process all of the information that we are inundated with on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
I think we should move into talking a little bit more about 12 because I feel like we've barely touched on 12 and pollination. I can see elements. I can always connect as many little pieces of what we've talked about to 12. But yeah, I kind of want to hear your take on what is it? Is it
The complex stability.
complex stability? I love it. I love just saying it. It just sounds cool.
Yeah, so
I know there's a lot of power there. Yeah.
for sure, 100%. So like we've been talking a lot about like organic matter, and growth, and so the major basis for complex stability is the understanding that you gain this niche stability, this able to stand up on your own 2 feet and walk and run forward because you've got these two organic bases to work with, right? I mean, I'm going to use my hand as an example, but I mean it's more associated to your feet. At least for our experience, is that you have these 5 points, right? Let's say your toes and your heel, where it's all stemming from. All these bones and ligaments and muscles are attached to this central point, which tends to strike first on the ground, right? And so from that base, we're able to gain some sort of balance, and between the two, we're able to, in most cases, hold ourselves up with
And
this
and able to kind
complexity.
of like rock, so it's complex because it's
Right.
not just like standing on one foot, which has its own challenges, but
Hmm.
like when you have two, um, what is just one palm? That's just organic,
Organic
what's the word?
balance.
Organic balance, right?
Hmm.
Okay,
Right.
but yeah, when you add two, it's like now you give a whole new dimension to that balance, right? So it's like that's how we're bipedal and we can move, um, backwards, forwards, left, right. It's how we can dance. I mean,
Yeah.
um, and
Yeah.
dancing. Oh my gosh, a little explosion of like, oh, like dance, and then 12. The pollination, right? Dancing is really connected with intimacy and the pollination between a relationship between two people,
Yeah.
uh, where you're kind of dancing together. So yeah, like if 12 feels very much like the number of dance.
Yeah.
Uh, Complex stability is being able to dance. I mean, are we human or are we dancer? Thank you, killers.
Yeah.
It's such a prophetic statement. I've recycled that one in my brain a whole bunch because it's
Hmm.
like, um, yeah, and getting back to play, like, are we here to do the best thing that we can do, like the best factory, let's produce and make it efficient, or are we here to dance or like do the dishes because the dishes need to be done, or is it like how can we make doing the dishes a dance, of experience? How many different
Hmm.
ways can you do the dishes,
Right.
and give it that complex ability,
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny.
in
It's like
action?
that's exactly where I was headed with it too. Is that
Mm.
it's like dance, right? We're given these very complex mechanisms, our feet, in which we are able to balance and dance and glide and move through this life in a different way. It's the thing that allows us to walk the path,
Mm.
right? The thing that allows us to create this whole new pathway if we need it, right? Because a pathway is what an avenue and a direction by which a person walks regularly, so that it kind of moves the grass out of the way. It sometimes it can kill the things that are in the way. It's a bit destructive in that sense, right? Because,
How do you mean? Yeah.
well, I mean, if you go through a path, right, and you walk it every day, like you're
Mm.
eventually going to kill the grass that's growing there
Hmm.
because you've walked that spot over and over and over again until the grass refuses to grow there, right? So, but I mean, that's also the part of organic balance, right? Organic balance is the number six. It's death, right? It's
Oh.
transformation. So while things may die, it gets reborn into something else. So you've got
Uh,
a double emphasis on that understanding. So yeah, I mean, it's tragic that you're killing the grass in this area by walking this direction every single time, but you've also made this an easier path to walk because now there's no foliage growing there,
mm.
right? Things are not A bush is not going to just sprout up right there because you're constantly walking it, right? There's things don't want to
Might
grow there.
start, might start, but it's quickly gonna meet its end.
Yeah, and so like that's the kind of delicate balance that kind of happens, that delicate dance that occurs. It's like, oop, that one kind of hurt, but now we're going to clear that spot out of the path and make it easier to walk on, and we're going to keep going. We're going to jam through this, and it's going to be fun, right?
Yeah.
And so, um, let's see oops, looking at the week, which is the unit. So, um, yeah. So this is also the understanding that we're in a this dance is not one sided, right? I mean, you can dance by yourself, but it's a lot more fun to dance with somebody else, right? And that whole idea of pollination comes into effect. Like, yeah, you can dance by yourself, but are you creating something truly profound? When you do it with another person, then it becomes explosive because there's energy being exchanged. There's an understanding, there's a cooperation that's happening. Someone's going to lead, and then that other person's going to react, and then they're going to make a motion, and then you're going to react. And it's just this delicate play that happens. But in that same understanding, things give to other things that are going to receive. So that idea that we're going through this pathway, the grass is going to give way, the plants are going to give way, so that they both grow efficiently and coexist. So, and I mean, this also relates to the idea of the road, which is why I keep bringing up the path, because the road is the 12th symbol, and they're right. And so they're very intimately linked, these ideas. So while 12 doesn't necessarily mean road, road always means 12. Right? So this is also kind of relating to the idea of how we need to cultivate our garden, right? So if we're making sure that we're weeding stuff and maintaining the proper nutrition and moisture and giving the right amount of light, we also need a path to walk down so we're not stepping on our plants as we're going through the garden.
Right.
So in order to do that and allow everything to grow in a harmonious way, we have to have somewhere to walk. We have to have this complex stability in order for everything to move and grow and pollinate and be the things that they need to be. A bit of structure, right?
That's what I was going to say. That's kind of cool. It's like because it's back to the container, right? It's like even if you're planting things in ground in your garden, right? You need this path to separate the sections of your garden, so that you can maintain it, and so that you can access it. And it's just natural anyway, even if you're not a gardener, right? Like there's animals in the forest and stuff that will follow the same paths to and from a water source and where they get their food, you know. So, and they'll follow the same path, and so that it happens naturally in any environment anyway, just through the ecosystem, you know, kind of forms these trails, these roads, just naturally. And I just think that's so cool. I've been thinking, it's been kind of growing as we've been discussing. Like this day is really cool in the sense that it's like, because like we drew so many parallels between the reed and the seed, and then also like, but the 12 seems like the odd man out in a sense. It's because it's not, and yet it is there, because like we're talking about, the road is the symbol of the road, so it is still that structure. So, and it's making me realize that I'm pretty sure any day, but this is the first day where I'm really like coming into my own realization or understanding of the cohesiveness between all of the points of the day is profound, where they all kind of share this element of structure, complex stability, you know, and a seed, you know, having its shell, and the reed being, you know, like needing to go stiff and straight and follow a certain path. Blowing my mind, man.
Yeah. So, to your credit, like every
You love giving me credit, by the way.
almost all of the signs relate to each other because the more complex signs all contain the understanding and knowledge of the previous signs. Right? So the reed is the 13th symbol, which would be 12 plus 1. So it understands the necessity for a path and it also understands the infinite potential that is the first symbol, which is just galactic a
Isn't it
I want to say
first?
aformality, but just almost amoeba-ish in its understanding. Like it's not formless, but it has potential for everything. So like the knowledge that it needs to grow in a straight and narrow, but have circular structure, right? That G, that potential that allows the things from above to come down below, right? Because it's got that hollow center as it's channeling things from below into the space above so that it can grow in a structured way. So it leaves that, understanding for limitless potential open. It's all there with that consistent straight growth, right? So the understanding that we need to have some sort of structure in our life, which is generally laid out in a fairly complex but stable way towards in order to be able to grow towards heaven, right? A dense
Yeah,
from a more dense understanding to a less dense understanding.
less dense. Is that also entropy? Less dense? Not necessarily.
Um Actually, if we're going to take it from the diamond analogy, yeah, actually that's entropy.
Right?
100% because you're going from that hard dense structure to a almost formless less dense material.
Right. Something that an idea that I came across recently that makes sense is is anything that is dual in nature like that, like entropy and enthalpy, or right,
Mm-hmm.
um, is that they're not necessarily opposites. They're on the same spectrum, right? So
Mm-hmm.
even though they're dualist in nature, they're measuring the same thing. So uh, we've talked a lot about like making diamonds out of coal, um, but that's tantamount to uh, uh, going from a seed to a tree,
Mm-hmm.
because you're expanding outward and becoming so many different things rather than just one little seed, um, and both make something brand new and beautiful, or um, you know greater than the 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 sum of the original parts. Just like
Yeah.
even, oh my gosh, just like the universe, Big Bang. They talk about how we're moving towards entropy, but eventually that will collapse on itself because things can only go so far apart before they have no more momentum to have any more space to go, and so uh, I don't know what force would it would just be like the the interchange between the breath in and the breath out, or breath out and then the next breath in. It's
Mm-hmm.
the same process, or it's a microcosm of the same process that's
Yeah,
happening
yeah.
on a universal scale. That's crazy to oh my god, that's too crazy to
So
think about it now.
so like you're 100% spot on with realizing that these two ideas and principles, the number 4, the number 13, enthalpy and entropy, are just
Oh,
two sides of the same coin. They're not opposites, but poles, polarity. They're both part of the same magnet, just expressing themselves in opposite directions, right? Opposite forces. So when and the Mayans are all about numerological understanding as well. So not only does the 13th symbol contain all the information of the other symbols behind it, but it is also a polar representation of the number that 3 and 1 add up to, which is 4, which is the
oh,
seed, right? Yeah.
yeah. it's impossible
So
for how can you not make so many connections with just a little bit? And this, I mean, to me, this makes learning so much fun, right? When you kind of get to discover it on your own, it's not somebody telling you out of a book, like, oh, next we're going to learn this. It's kind of fun when you start with something as simple as just numbers. I mean, simple, but they're also conceptual, so they can be difficult. But you take any field of study and you can connect it to every other field of study. And I say simple numbers because it's like with numbers, and that's, as I mentioned, like I'm trying to draw so many parallels from the numbers 1 through 10, but obviously I could keep going.
mhm.
Um, but just to kind of as an introductory dive into like, yeah, all the structures of everything are there in the first couple of numbers. And then each number that you add, you're only building on what you've already established and the different kinds of patterns and interplay that happen between them and that was before. And then it recycles too. You can always recycle and reintroduce a new number one, a new number two, and on all the way through.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
how they combine. Oh man, you can go crazy. You want to become a crazy person? You want to go to a psych ward? Just start talking about how the numbers are lining up, and 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 seeing signs everywhere.
Yeah.
People will they'll commit you right away.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
all you have to do is commit yourself.
I mean, there's a lot of media sources that do that, right?
Mm.
There's a few references in anime and cartoons. Jim Carrey's movie, The Number 23.
23.
Right, yeah, like this, the idea that you get so obsessed with a calculation or a number that you're literally writing it on the wall because you can't stop thinking about it, and there's not enough space in on a chalkboard to write it down. It all has to go everywhere, and so you just end up in a bare room just writing on the wall, and you start to ignore other things because it all comes back to the same thing. Is kind of, I think, the point by which you start to either stick in a loop or break out, right? Because if you stick in that loop, if you stay stuck in your seed of just cyclical understanding, you'll just sit there and rot,
Right.
right? But if you break out of that and see the higher purpose and let all that stuff go, that shell, then you can grow beyond it and utilize those things that you've learned to become something more, to experience something more.
Ooh.
Yeah. I think
Okay,
that's a good spot.
yeah, totally. I think so. I think we brought it all the way around. Good one.
All right, man. Well, we'll catch you later.